trouble getting your audience to talk to you. You put a social media post out there and no one replies. You get crickets. Maybe you do video or you send an email out to your list and nobody hits reply. Nobody's talking to you on the video. Nobody's putting any comments out there. Tell me if you experience this. Give me a yes in the comments if this is your world. Because this is what I want to talk about with you today. And there are some important reasons why we want people to talk back to us, right? For one, and I find this here on video all the time, it's easier to talk to you when you're talking to me, when I'm asking questions, when I know that you're out there, that, is somebody out there at all can be really helpful. Even if we have a bunch of followers, are they actually paying attention? When they hit reply, they tell us that, and it grounds us and it helps us feel like we're talking to someone. So it can be incredibly helpful just to know that they're out there. But also, when we can get people to reply to us, we learn more about them. We can find out what their thoughts are. Their engagement makes us interested, helps us feel, again, like we're talking to somebody, but also it gets them engaged. It gets them to feel like they've got something invested. Excuse me. All right, there we go. And it helps them be more interested. The more they talk to us and the more we engage with them, the more they'll talk to us. Honestly, a lot of this ties into the know, like, trust, KLT, helping them get to know us and helping us get to know them, helping them to like us, helping us to like them, in building mutual trust. That's what that engagement is all about. In the end, marketing is about communication. That's all we're doing is communicating, but we're communicating with a particular intent. We're communicating with a particular audience, but it helps to get them to talk back to us. That communication needs to go both ways, right? So how do we get them to talk to us? That's what I want to talk about with you today. Give me a yes in the comments if you struggle to get your audience to engage with you, because that is absolutely what we're talking about. And I've been there. I've 100% been there, and I've really broken through in a lot of ways. And I want to share this with you, what it takes, what I've learned along the way to get our audiences to talk back to us so that we can learn more about them, build trust, and build relationships. Because the best business relationships are built on that trust, that interaction, the relationships that we're building with our audience. So, and I like to get into these pretty fast here, so I am going to do that here as well. There are two key elements that get our audience to engage with us. Two things that will help it happen. And one of them we're going to talk about today, the other one no. But so let's talk about the one we're not going to get into first. The two key elements are the size of your audience and inviting them to engage. Now, I'm not going to talk about the size of your audience, but I am going to say that the more people that are in your audience, the more likely you'll have people in your audience that are interested and willing to engage. It's a numbers game is one piece of it. That is why when you see influencers and people with just big followings, they tend to have a lot more replies because they've got more people. The quantity does equal more engagement because they're just going to end up with more people in their audience that are likely to engage. And then once a few people engage, it starts to be a domino effect and more people just start engaging because that's what's happening there. And one person's engagement will influence additional engagement from other people. It's kind of a, once a few people are engaging, it's kind of a, this is who we are, this is how to be here. And it also just becomes a conversation and you'll see people start engaging and talking amongst each other within the comments. But it takes quantity, it takes a size audience to make that happen. But if you don't have that size audience, it doesn't mean your audience isn't going to engage. That's what I want to get into today, is especially if you don't have a huge audience where it's just happening out of sheer numbers. What can you do to get your audience to engage with you? That's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about inviting your audience to engage. What does that mean? What does that look like? What do you need to do? And I'm going to have some examples along the way. So, but again, the question I have for you today is this a struggle for you? Are you struggling to get your audience to engage? Give me a yes in the comments if you are. Give me a no in the comments if you're like, no, I've got this figured out. Good morning, Jason. Great to have you here. Jason, tell me, are you struggling to have your audience engage with you or not? Yes or no? Do you struggle to get your audience to engage with you? Let's get into this right now. I want to talk about what it is that you need to do to get your audience to engage. And I've got 4 things specifically that I'm going to walk through, and they build upon each other. So if you've got one and you're like, yeah, I know that, that's okay. We're building on it as we go. So the first thing that you need to do to invite your audience to engage is to ask them questions. That might be obvious, but that's okay. We're building on this, so stick around. The questions you ask need to be of interest to them and are helpful to you, right? To a point. It's okay, of interest to them needs to start first. And then if it's helpful to you. So for example, we could sit here and talk about pizza. What do you like on your pizza? And it's of interest to you. Is it going to help me in my marketing business? Maybe, maybe not. It is going to tell me a little bit more about you. So it is possible to ask that. And if you like pizza and you want to answer that question, by all means, do it. So anything to learn, anything you get your audience to respond to is going to be helpful to you in terms of what kind of personalities there are. So there's nothing wrong with asking those kinds of questions, but it can be helpful to also ask questions that are in line with what you offer. But asking questions that are of interest to them is your first thing. And when you're asking questions about your audience, so when you ask anybody something about them, it's inherently of interest to them. So asking them questions about themselves, not about what they believe about something separate from them. What do you think is going on over here? What do you think they're doing with, I don't know, they're installing pipes down the street in the center of town. What do you think of that? Is it even related to my audience? It's not. It doesn't belong in the conversation unless I'm only talking to people that live in my environment, in my area. But, of interest to them, I talk with my audience about promoting their businesses, about marketing and things around marketing, social media, email marketing, video. So with that in mind, I need to ask those questions in a way that are of interest to my audience. So a question like, which social media platforms, plural, are you using in your marketing? Right? That's of interest to them, and it's going to give me a little bit more information about my audience. Are you doing email marketing? Yes or no? That's an interest. Or if you're doing email marketing, which platform are you using? And I'm asking my audience about their marketing. I'm learning something about them, but I'm also asking them something about them. And people love to talk about themselves. Jason says, I love audience engagement. I'll ask open-ended questions mixed in with yes or no questions. Nothing decisive. It has to be something they want to answer. So I ask questions that draw them in and they answer. 100%, Jason. And I love that you're hinting at where I'm headed next. So that's fantastic. Thank you, Jason, for answering that question. That's a great answer. So the next thing, so we know all that we need to ask questions, and maybe you knew this already, but even in social media, you need to ask a question. If you want them to respond, you need to give them something to answer to respond to. And it needs to be a very clear question. It can't be like, here are 3 different questions. We need to be like, here's the question. It needs to be a very specific question. And so the second thing, so I said the first thing is you need to ask questions. The second thing, and I'm going to get into this, is you need to ask specific questions. And those specific questions, for example, and you'll see this, and it works for a large audience, but not for a small audience. You can't just say, ask me anything. I can't just put it out there and be like, you have a question? Ask me anything. It's just so vague and it's so off topic. And I hear these now. It helps to be like, ask me anything about, now we're getting specific, email marketing. Ask me anything about social media. But we can get even more specific. What questions do you have about Facebook? What questions do you have about writing an email that gets you results? What questions do you have about building your email list, right? So, those are getting much more specific and creating context. And the more specific we can get with our audience, the more likely they'll be able to answer the question. And here's why. It's an easier lift. We're not asking them to work really, really hard. We're asking them to work a little hard because we're asking them, in this case, my example, to ask me a question. Right? And these are kind of big. These are still big questions. What questions do you have about copywriting. What questions do you have about writing a good email? It's still really vague. It's really kind of big. And so we want to get even more specific. And so I want to roll very quickly to the thing. This is number 3, the thing that will help you get answers to your questions. And Jason, in his comment, and this was over on Facebook, so if you're watching on either LinkedIn or YouTube, then you probably can't see it. But he made a comment about asking open-ended questions mixed in with what he called yes or no questions, which are close-ended. So you've got close-ended questions and open-ended questions. And an open-ended question is, what flavored jelly do you like? A close-ended question, close-ended, it's like a yes or no, or a do you like grape jelly or do you like strawberry? That's a close-ended. I've only given you 2 options. And people are more likely to answer a close-ended question where they only have a couple options versus an open-ended question because it's easier. Because it's easier for them to get to their answer, and it's easier for them to provide that answer. So that's why. And your challenge is not to get the information. Your challenge is to get them to reply, to get them to actively hit reply on an email and start typing, or to click in the comments in your social media post and start typing. What they type, do they feel? So there's the getting them the desire to reply, getting them interested, but also making that answer something that they can provide without a ton of thought, right? Because the harder they have to think about it, the less likely they're going to. Sorry, I'm putting my phone on just do not disturb. The less they have to think about it, the more readily available that answer is, the easier it will be for them to reply. But again, this also goes back to they need to be interested and capable of replying, right? They need to know what that answer is. And so making it an easy lift, making them want to reply, and making the answer easily accessible for them. Making them want to reply, making the answer easily accessible for them. Those are the 2 things that we're looking at there. And so when you ask a close-ended question, you're making it easier easier for them to reply, easier for them to access their answer. Here's another example. Open-ended question. What are you doing for fun this summer? And I'd love to know. Hit reply and tell me what you're doing for fun this summer. That's a great open-ended question. And it will work if you've got a large audience or an engaged audience. They already are likely to respond to you. And honestly, like in a case of a video situation like this, once they start to respond, you start to get more responses. It really is about timing. It is about the instance, the specific instance. Maybe in one particular instance, you're getting more replies, but you want to get more replies across the board, not just to the one post, right? So an open-ended question: what are you doing for fun this summer? And again, feel free to hit reply. But here's the close-ended version. This summer, will you be going to the beach? Yes or no? Tell me in the comments, yes or no. Are you on the beach or not? I'd love to know. I'm hoping to find the beach, but I first need to find people to go to the beach with. That's my challenge. But that's okay. I should put that out there somewhere. Anyway, but that close-ended question, it's a yes or no, and it's just going to be easier, faster, and so it's going to be easier to respond, faster for them to respond because it's a single question, a single answer, yes or no. And it's going to make it easier for them to choose to reply because it's a quickie, right? So think about it as a quickie. It's a quick answer. And if you've got a multitude, here's a quick insider trick. If you're doing something like a video and you've got a multitude, or a presentation, and you've got a multitude of questions, make the first questions easier. Make them close-ended. If you have some open-ended questions, start with close-ended to get them actively replying. Because once they're replying, it's more likely that they'll continue to reply if they stick around. So there's that. So what we've talked about so far, and we're not quite done yet. We've talked about asking questions, getting specific in the type of questions you ask, and then close-ended versus open-ended questions. Jason says his little sister moved to Hawaii, so you're hoping to find yourself on a Hawaiian beach. Oh, Jason, so jelly. I'm so jealous. That sounds wonderful. Tell me, Jason, which island is she on? I'd love to know. And that's like a midline question. That's actually a close-ended question because there are only so many islands. An open-ended question in that case for Jason would be, I've got like 5 possibilities here. So what is it you like about the beach? It's really vague. It's really vague, you know, and I'd love to know, and it'd be a great conversation. I personally like walking on the beach. I was on a beach, just complete aside, I was on a beach last year. I was at the on the Cape, off of Massachusetts, the Cape, and I was in Brewster, and the sandbars come up at low tide, and you can walk from the beach through all this water and go hang out on the sandbars. And it's just really, really cool because the sandbars are way out there, and walking through the water is scary because it looks steep, but it's not. And it's just a really cool experience to do that. So anyway, can you tell the weather's getting warmer around here? We're talking about the beach. I need to go to the beach again this year. I would love to. All right. So we've talked about asking specific questions, and we've talked about close-ended versus open-ended questions. Here's an open-ended question. Give me an example of a close-ended question. That's an open-ended question of a closed-ended questions. Katie, welcome, Katie. So great to have you here. You're taking a Great Lakes vacation, freshwater beaches everywhere. Oh, that sounds delightful, Katie. Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh, which Great Lakes are you going to? I'd love to know. Tell me in the comments which Great Lakes you're going to. A Great Lakes vacation. There must be more than one. You're talking plural. Oh, it's supposed to be beautiful up that way. I've done some driving up there, and those lakes are just gorgeous. So we've talked about closed-ended and open-ended, and you're starting to see the difference there, right? So that's fantastic, and that's where we want to go. I want to level this up for you. I've got one step up so we've talked about closed-ended, open-ended. How can you level these up and get more information? And what I'm going to explain here is something I've done by email a number of times, and it works really, really well because it is a close-ended question, but more than a yes or no. Superior, Huron, and Michigan. You're going to 3 of the Great Lakes. That sounds fantastic. No sharks. You know what, Katie, you're right, because here off the Cape, we have sharks, and yes. Yeah, my father used to fish off the Cape, and he would regularly pull in sand sharks and other types of sharks, and they're terrifying. So I'm with you on that in the no sharks. Complete side note. Did you know there are no snakes in Alaska? Did you know that? Let me know. I used to live in Alaska, and as you're driving into Alaska from Canada, there's a huge sign, and it says on the sign, it's got like a bunch of facts about Alaska, and one of the things it says is that there are no snakes in Alaska because it's too cold, I would imagine, and that's reasonable for me. How did they figure that out, though? That's what I want to know. All right, so here's an example. Let's say you don't quite want to ask a yes or no. Let me give you a couple specific examples, and I'm going to ask one of you. Actually, here's the one I'm going to ask of you, and then I'll give you a second example behind it. So this is about making what feels like an open-ended question a little bit more closed so that people will respond. Here's my question for you, and I am asking this question, so do me a favor, whether you're watching this live or the recording, I'd love to hear your response to this, but here's an example. And what this model is asking questions that give them options. So it's not an open-ended question because it's not big and vague, but it's not closed-ended because it's not just 1 or 2 answers. I'm going to give you an option for, I think, there are 4 options to this. So it's giving you it's a multiple choice question. And here's my question for you. Where in your marketing do you struggle? So which of these, here's a better way of asking this. Which of these do you struggle with most in your marketing? That's the way I want to ask it. Which of these, I'm going to give you a list, do you struggle with the most in your marketing? Do you struggle with knowing what to do? That's option A. Option B, do you struggle with applying what to do to your own business? So converting it. Okay, I know what to do, but how do I do this in my business? 3, do you struggle just with doing it, with the execution? You know what to do, you know how to do it with your business, you're just not doing it. That's C, or 3. And then 4, or D, is something else. Is it something other than those choices? So I'm going to repeat this because I'm doing this verbally. It makes a lot more sense when you see it written. Which of these do you struggle with most in your marketing? Knowing what to do, applying what to do to your own business, doing it, or something else? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to know that. But that's an example. So do let me know, what your answer is in the comments. But that's an example of giving somebody options, increasing the likelihood that they'll respond because the answers are specific and you've even provided them But then there's also room to reply with more detail, especially with the something else. And I love asking that something else because you always hear something. I always get responses and I'm like, I didn't even think of that. That was a brilliant answer. I'm so glad I replied. And I do have another example of this coming up that really, really worked well for me that I want to tell you about. Katie says B. Katie says that she gets the marketing, but she struggles with applying it to her own business. Thank you, Katie. That's really helpful, actually. And I asked this question for 2 reasons, right? And I just set this out in my email. It's working really well. I'm getting some great responses. I'm asking it with an intention. I'm building a course and I have another idea on a back burner that I'm like, I could do that faster. Which one does it would serve my audience better? This course that I'm building that talks more about what to do and how to apply it to your own business, or this other program that I want to do that's more about getting it done. So which one of these, and that's really my intention here. So I sent this message out and that's why I'm asking. So, give me your answers. I'd love to know. But Katie says B, applying what to do to your own business. And that is a really common response. It's not, everybody's not responding, but I understand that because it's really hard to think about our own businesses. We're emotionally invested. We've got so many possibilities, so many ideas floating around, and it can be really hard to be like, okay, but how do I do this in my business? It's hard to do that because we're in amongst the trees of our own business. And it's easier to decide, to make decisions, to apply things when we're standing on a hill overlooking our business, overlooking the trees. So we have to find a way to get ourselves overlooking the trees in order to make decisions. And that's hard to do when you're emotionally invested. So I 100% get it, Katie. We are also still talking about Hawaii. And Jason says the big island in Hawaii has sharks. Oh, yeah, stay away from sharks this summer. Yeah, Jason, none of that. Nope. I think we should all agree to stay away from the sharks this summer. Okay. So I want to give you another example of this question, of these options, because it's worked really, really well for me. When I was deciding whether or not to get onto YouTube, I was also thinking about doing a podcast. So I sent my list and I asked in a few other places this question. If I were to show up in one of these different places, which one would you be more likely to listen to? That was kind of the question. Or which one would you more I think it was a much simpler phrase. Which of these do you think I should do next? It was probably something like that. And I answered it with, I think it was A, YouTube, B, podcasting, C, something else. And it was really interesting because out of everybody that responded, more than 30% gave me a something else. My audience specifically was asking me to blog. Every time they said something else, they were like, if you're doing video, give me the transcript. If you're doing a podcast, give me the transcript, or just flip and blog. If some combination within there, because my audience, largely introverts and ambiverts, and reminder, ambiverts are halfway between introverts and extroverts. So introverts and ambiverts have a high propensity towards reading, have a high propensity towards writing, right? And so they tend, and here's the thing is I know that they are writers. I didn't realize they were readers. That's where, can you see? I'm like pulling this out of the back of my head. I knew that they were writers because a lot of my audience tends to blog, which is why I have a workshop on blogging. But I didn't make the connection until that conversation. This was last year. I didn't make this connection until they said, would you please write out on your blog so that I can read it? And I was like, oh, they're not just writers, they're readers. Oh, so the power of this, asking your audience questions, especially in a multiple choice kind of a situation where the last one is something else. And I do not say other. I say something else. It's a more accessible, it's how we think. We don't sit there and think other. We think, no, it's something else, right? So that the power of those words contextually, something else, seems to incite better replies than other. It's more personal. It's more like we're talking, which is what I'm doing, right? I'm not a huge company, trying to talk to millions of people. I'm trying to talk to my very, what I'm hoping is an engaged and interested audience that I want to actively help. And so using language like something else can help make that connection. In other words, talk to them like you would talk to your friends, right? If I would talk to my friends, they came in and I was like, do you want coffee, tea, water, or something else? I would not say, do you want coffee, tea, water, or other? right? So what would you say in real life when you're hanging out? I'm hanging out here with Jason and Katie, right? And so I'm like, do you want coffee, tea, water, or something else? So think in the terms of the language you're using and make sure it's the way you would talk about it. So, this is like a deeper thing. In addition to giving them options, do it in a language that makes sense in regular conversation. And I love, Katie, what you added, and I did see it, and I want to go back to this. So, Katie, in response to my first question, my first question was, which one of these do you struggle with the most in your marketing? Knowing what to do, applying what to do to your own business, doing it, or something else? I don't know why I'm using my fingers that way. And Katie said B, so she struggles to apply what to do to her own business. She says, and then actually getting it done is the next obstacle, which really speaks to this program that I'm looking to do. I've got 2 programs, right? I've got this course that's like what to do and how to apply it to your own business. And then I've got let's get it done. And so, and so maybe they need to go in that order. Having this conversation with you is helping me. And it's helping me help you, because I need to figure out how to put this out there in a way that's going to help you the best. So this is a helpful conversation. Thank you, Katie, for replying. I welcome anybody, as you're watching the recording, to answer those questions as well. I hope you will, because it will help me make decisions on what to offer to help you move forward in promoting your business. So that is it for now. Whew, this was a long one, but I hope you found it helpful. I enjoyed talking about this. This is actively something I'm doing in my business right now, and I really wanted to share it with you. I am here every Thursday, 10 a.m. Eastern time. And if you have a specific topic that you'd like me to cover, let me know in the comments, because I would be happy to do that. I absolutely would be. I try to talk about things that are going on in my marketing, but also in the marketing of the people I'm in touch with within my audience. But I'd love to know more about what it is you'd like help in, because I absolutely would be up for bringing that up. Would be up for talking about that here during our calls. Jason said this was so much fun. I really enjoyed it as well, Jason. So I'm glad that you did too. Thank you both to Jason and Katie and everyone else who's watching but not chatting with me for stopping by. I am grateful for you. And I hope that you found this helpful. I will talk to you again next Thursday. Until then, have a great week, a great weekend. It is a holiday here in the U.S., so enjoy it and be safe. I'll talk to you again soon. Take care. Thanks so much.